Australian on an overdue gap year. 6 months ago I quit my job, and in that time I've been travelling. So I've been to Japan, South Korea, Thailand, back in Australia for a little bit over Christmas, and right now I'm in Siem Reap, Cambodia, where I've been for about a month. This is the first time I've ever recorded a vlog, so it's going to be a little bit of a mishmash of things, probably a little bit around why I decided to take this time off and go travelling, and also a little bit around the purposes behind why I'm doing this vlog. And I guess I'll also touch on a little bit about what I've really liked about Siem Reap, because I've been here for a month and it's been a really great place to base myself. So I guess the obvious question is, why did I quit my job? I had been working at my previous employer for about 5 years, and it was a good place to work. I had a really great team of people I liked. It was interesting work. So career-wise, there was no real reason to up and leave. If anything, all signs pointed to sticking around and progressing with the place. But I guess for me, I'd always wanted to take some time off to go travel for an extended period. I never had that opportunity back in my teens or 20s, but between school and university, or even after university, that just was not an option for me. And I'd always sort of told myself, well, when I turn 40, I might take a bit of time off and go on a bit of an adventure then. Of course, when I turned 40, it was the middle of the COVID pandemic, so there was really no way to go travelling. Like, Australia was closed, it was very hard to get out or get back in. Fast forward a few more years, COVID's obviously over, and the idea sort of kept popping up around, take some time for yourself, do some travel. A few things fell into place on the home front that sort of meant there was an opportunity here I could take. A family member was looking for a place to stay and they could rent my place, so I didn't have to worry about the mortgage. Also, both my parents, their health was and still is stable, and I'm well aware as they're aging that won't always be the case. And also my cat passed away. So I had a cat which I got when I was 21, that cat died when I was 42, and I didn't have those responsibilities. One of the other motivating factors for me for wanting to take an extended break to go travel is the simple fact that as an Australian, to go anywhere, you're sitting on a plane for a minimum of 8 to 12 hours before you even get to the destination. If you're going to Europe or America, it's 22, 24 hours. When you're there, you have this kind of pressure to try and pack as much in as you can because you've travelled so far and it's cost you so much. So you're like, yeah, I'll fit in 5 cities in 5 days and I'll cram every minute of my schedule in. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Like, I've travelled like that in the past and I've had some really enjoyable experiences doing that in the past. But I kind of was like, if I can take a bit of a longer time to get to know the place better and explore it more and get a better feel for it, then I'll have a more enjoyable time. And that's certainly been the case. That's certainly what I found when I was in Japan and Korea, and it's what I've really liked about being in Cambodia for this past month as well. Like, I feel like I'm actually getting a bit more of an understanding of what the place is like. I was just having a think about, what do I want to do for the year ahead? And I decided I'd actually have a crack at trying to make some YouTube videos and just recording what I'm doing, because I trained as a journalist, but my skill set's largely around written storytelling. And I figured, well, it'd be good to try and, up my skills a little bit in terms of videography and film, and also just, writing for, not so much writing, but, just being able to structure a visual story and communicate in a different format. So that's sort of what's prompted me to do this. So there are a couple of reasons why I chose to base myself here in Siem Reap, Cambodia. City I've been to previously. I'd been here a couple of years ago with my partner. We did the typical tourist thing where we came in, got to talk to a guy at the temple, went back to the hotel, temple, hotel, temple, hotel, maybe through in a restaurant. And that was what we did for about 3 or 4 days. And while I had a really great time exploring the temples and we saw a lot of things, it was a really good experience to share together, I just felt like it all started blending one into the other, and I couldn't really tell you, quite exactly what we did or where we went. I also knew from that brief taste I had that the city was actually really set up for tourism. There is a good standard of service, there's a good standard of English spoken, it's got everything you'd want. Like, there's really good supermarkets, there's good gyms, there's services and connections to other parts of Cambodia that are really easy to access. The town itself is set up for this. Like, if you want to get rowdy, you can go to Pub Street. If you don't want to be rowdy, you don't have to. You can go to just have a nice meal at a really nice restaurant. One of the other things that brought me to Siem Reap was the fact that it is a touristy town, is it meant that when I wanted to talk to people and be a bit social, I could go out and talk and meet people. I could, join a tour or go to a bar or a restaurant, and there were people about you could chat to, which, is good when you're by yourself. The other aspect of Siem Reap that I've really liked, as I've mentioned, has been some of the restaurants. Now, as a celiac, I will talk about gluten-free here. There's 3 or 4 places I found that did really good gluten-free, and I felt quite safe eating there. Of course, the highlights for me was a place called New Leaf Eatery. They do an excellent range of both Khmer and Western cuisine. They can do most of it gluten-free, and it's all been really good. The staff are really friendly, and some of the profits are used to help support educational charities. One of my favourite places was Chubby Gonzo's. Now, this is a Tex-Mex place that doesn't deserve to be as good as it is for what it is, for where it is. There's literally a hole in the wall in an alleyway in Cambodia, but they are pumping out some really good food. An American acquaintance of mine thinks it's probably one of the best in Southeast Asia, and I'll trust his judgment on Tex-Mex more than mine. But everything I had there was delicious, including the margaritas, and it was cheap as. It was like, you know, $5, maybe $6 for a bowl. And the tacos are only $1.50 if you can eat wheat. Probably my favourite place to fall in Siem Reap, to be honest, was Gelato Lab. This is a little shop that is churning out some really great flavours. It's run by an Italian guy. And my favourite probably was the Campot pepper. It's like chocolate with a bit of a chili kind of kick to it. The other aspect I've really liked about Siem Reap has been there are other things to do other than just go look at the temple ruin. So a couple of the highlights for me have been the Angkor Botanical Gardens. These are just on the outskirts of town as you head towards Angkor Wat, and they're just a really nice peaceful space. There is a rather forlorn looking monkey and a couple of very sad looking ostriches. I really don't think they needed to be there, but the overall atmosphere was really nice. There's a nice cafe as well, and it just was a good place just to relax and chill for free for a couple of hours. The other place that I thought was really interesting, and this is incredibly touristy, but it was a very interesting experience, was a place called the Apopo Centre. This is around the corner from the Botanical Gardens, and it costs $10 for entry. So what it does is it just outlines the work of this charity that trains giant African rats to sniff out landmines and unexploded bombs. Unexploded ordnance and landmines are a really big issue in Cambodia. There's an estimated 4 to 6 million landmines alone left over from the Cambodian Civil War from the 1970s through to the 1990s. And there's also countless bits of unexploded ordnance from the bombing campaign that took place in the 1970s by the Americans. The traditional way to find a landmine or a piece of unexploded ordnance and safely remove it is to use metal detectors, which is very slow going and very risky because the operator could accidentally, trigger an explosion. Where the rats have an advantage, and this is only in certain situations where the rats are suited for, is they aren't going to trigger an explosion, they're too light for that. But they can be trained to just sniff out the explosives, not the metal. So they can clear an area far faster than someone with a metal detector who has to go slowly and check every piece of metal they find. So like I said, the centre itself is very touristy, but it does give you some insight into a new way of tackling an old problem, and it was interesting to see, and the rats are also really cute. So, and for $10 it's a good way to support a charity that's doing some good work to help people here in Cambodia. In terms of other attractions, there's touristy things like an aquarium, there's a giant Ferris wheel we drove past on the bus the other day. You do have the river, there is Angkor National Museum. It's $10 for entry. I'm not going to sit here and say it's the best museum experience I've ever had. However, it did provide a really good overview of Cambodian history and the history of Angkor Wat, particularly as the civilization shifted from being a Hindu one to a Buddhist one, and what that meant in terms of how the architectural styles changed and so forth. So if you are self-directing yourself around Angkor Wat, you're not getting a tour guide, this was a good introduction to that and a bit of history about Cambodia as well. It was lacking a little bit of information around, just how they actually built the bloody thing. Angkor Wat itself was apparently built using stone from earlier temples, as well as stuff that was quarried and brought here by, what it must have been a herd of slaves and elephants to transport all the materials. But they didn't really go into that. It was more around the religious backing of the kings and what they were trying to achieve and what the temples meant. The other thing about Siem Reap as well is you can travel down to Tonle Sap, which is the large lake at the centre of Cambodia, and check out the floating villages and the fishing villages on stilts. I didn't do that. I'm here in dry season, and the locals did sort of say to me, don't bother, it's going to be largely, you know, houses way up towering above you, or just, you know, you're going to travel quite a way to see the floating aspect. So I figured I'd skip that, but apparently it is very good and worth checking out during the wet season. Like anywhere you visit, there are some downsides to being here in Siem Reap. I guess the first and biggest one I've noticed is the simple fact that the new airport is a bit of a way out of town. The old airport was very close, it was only about a 10-minute ride from the centre. The new airport's an hour away. And they moved the airport to protect Angkor Wat because it was getting damaged by, you know, the aircraft movement, so I understand why it had to move. But in terms of getting there, you're looking now at about a $23 cab ride. There are some shared services that are a bit cheaper, but they didn't really line up with the flights. The other downside is it's the agricultural burning season, farmers are burning off, and you get a lot of smoke and haze and dust and stuff kicking around, which makes being outside a little bit unpleasant at times. If you've made it this far, thanks for sticking around. I know it's been a bit of an odd little amalgam of things here, but like I said, I want to just explain a little bit around why I quit, what I've been doing, you know, why I've started this vlog, and also, you know, what it's been like here for a month in Cambodia. So hopefully some of it's been useful or interesting. If it has, please hit the like and subscribe button. I guess that's what everybody else on YouTube says, so I'll say it too. And until next time, take care, safe travels.